All over the United States, and the world for that matter, there continues to be sightings of mysterious creatures that are seemingly not from this world, things that the viewer can't understand or categorize. Next up, we have two of those stories for you, one from the state of Ohio, the other from Idaho. It was the winter of 1983, and my wife and I had just moved to a small community in western Ohio called West Liberty, about an hour or so west of Columbus. I remember the day well. It was about 6 p.m. on a cold, dark winter day when we decided to go for a brisk walk down by the Mad River that ran through town. We were both in our late 20s at the time and very much into nature, so we enjoyed walking along the riverbank as well as along the trails near town. This day, we walked for probably a mile or more until we got to an area where there were no houses or roads nearby. It was completely surrounded by woods with only the river flowing past us on one side. There's also an old railroad track bed that runs parallel to the river, too, maybe 50 yards away from it, that's now used as a walking trail called the Simon Kenton Trail. Anyway, as we stood there looking out over the river, I noticed a large figure moving through the woods, maybe 100 yards or so to our right. It was too far away for me to make out any specific details, but it appeared to be larger than a man. But it was walking upright on two legs, which is what made me think human. As I watched it move through the trees, it seemed to disappear into what looked like a small opening in the brush, where an offshoot or maybe old railroad tracks ran through. I pointed it out to my wife, too, and said that I thought perhaps somebody had lost their dog. She agreed that it was probably just someone's lost dog, but the thing was, all I could think was that no dog would walk upright like that, or be that big. But it was the best conclusion I could come up with that made any sense. We decided this was all just too weird and started to head back home as it was getting late anyway. And it was also starting to get pretty dark due to it being winter time. So we started walking back towards town when all of a sudden we heard these crazy banging noises and quickly realized that the sound was coming from the direction that we had seen the thing go into the woods. There were no houses around for that kind of noise to be coming from, so we both looked at each other kind of funny and just walked quicker. As we got closer to where I thought whatever it was disappeared, I paid close attention to that small opening in the brush. Well, it was about 8 feet wide, actually. The thing is, though, these tracks hadn't been used in years, and they were overgrown with weeds and had grass all through them, so you couldn't really see them unless you knew exactly where to look. They also crossed under an old bridge that went over the river, which meant that this opening would lead us right underneath that bridge. I told my wife then that I thought perhaps whatever made those noises may have been down in that track bed under the old bridge, because there was nowhere else for anything to go, except maybe up into the trees where we had first seen the movement earlier. We stood there looking at each other, not really sure what to do, when all of a sudden we heard the same noise again, coming from under the bridge this time. And this time it was louder and closer, sounding like whatever it was really wanted to let us know it was there. At least that's the way we interpreted it. Well, we got the message and immediately continued on and didn't follow the tracks to the bridge. I mean, obviously we didn't have any idea what this thing could be, and my brain told me that it wasn't a dog or anything else normal. We basically sprinted the whole way home without incident, and we sat talking about what it could have been. We eventually also told our friends about what had happened that night, but no one had any answers for us, so we just kind of left it alone after that, figuring that maybe we were just exaggerating what we had seen due to being out in the cold and in the dark. But then a few nights later, when it was unusually warm, my wife and I decided to go out on our back porch swing, where we sat overlooking the yard while having some hot chocolate before going to bed. It's a covered, screened-in porch back there. It was probably close to 10 o'clock at night when we sat down on the swing, and then all of a sudden something ran through our backyard, making lots of noise and crashing through the brush and the trees that run next to the house. The thing is, there are no houses behind us, so whatever this thing was, it must have been coming from the woods across our street, which are a decent distance away. I got up to go look out the screen door on the porch that leads to the yard, and when I did, my wife yelled that she just saw something pass through our yard light. I'd noticed the flicker of the light too, because whatever it was so big it blocked out most of the light as it passed through it. She described what she saw as being like a huge, hairy man walking upright on two legs, but with very long arms swinging at its side while it moved through our yard. I followed my eyes to where she was pointing, but didn't see anything because it was too dark outside. But I could definitely hear whatever it was crashing through the brush and the trees. We looked at each other, locked the screen door, which we don't always do, and headed up to bed while checking that all the doors and the windows were locked. The next day, we went out. We found tracks in some soft dirt near where this all had happened, and they were definitely not human footprints. Although they resembled them somewhat, except for one thing, there were no distinct toes, only long, sharp-looking imprints. I eventually showed these tracks to some of my friends who lived in the area, and they told me that they didn't know what this could be, but it sure wasn't anything they had ever seen before, and they made sure to say that we needed to be super careful. My wife and I quickly, then and there, made the decision to just stay inside our house after dark from then on, or at least only on the porch with the screen door locked, as we really didn't know what could be roaming out there. After these two sightings or experiences or whatever you want to call them, we never really heard or saw anything else after that. But I did notice some years later when we were moving away from that house that a lot of the local farmers had started using dogs to guard their livestock at night. I also noticed that around this same time, people in our old neighborhood began putting up fences and cameras all over their yards. To me, it looked like they were trying to keep something out. Whatever it was, it may be the thing we saw. I really wonder if it still is out there, because since moving away, I haven't heard any other concrete reports coming from anywhere near that part of Ohio. Maybe someone else here who's listening has something similar that they've seen, though. If you do know of anything like this, in this area, please let me know so I can get more details on the updates. Thank you. This crazy story happened to me in 1995, back when I was about 16 years old. At the time, we lived in a small town in Idaho called Plummer. Plummer's about 30 miles south of Coeur d'Alene and about 10 miles east of the Washington state border. At the time, the town had a population of approximately 1,000 people, so it's not that big of a town, and there are plenty of farms around the area. My family owns a small farm outside of Plummer where we have cattle and horses. So I was taking care of my horse one evening in the barn with the barn door wide open when something caught my eye. Something off in the distance. At first I thought it was a coyote because they sometimes come to our property at night and try to get into our chicken coop and steal one of our chickens, if they can get away with it without getting shot by one of us before they make off with it. But this thing didn't look like a coyote I had ever seen before. It looked like it was on two legs most of the time, too, but it would drop to all fours every once in a while. It was walking in my direction, and I could tell that this thing was huge. I literally thought maybe it was some escaped circus animal or something, only because it just looked so weird to be anything else. But then my horse started getting scared as the thing got closer, so I knew that whatever it wasn't good. I then turned off all the lights in the barn so this thing couldn't see me very well as it walked up towards our fence line to try and see it better. The only light came from the moon, which cast a glow over everything around me, including this creature. It stood there about 10 minutes, sniffing around like a dog would do when it catches a scent it likes, or doesn't like. And then out of nowhere, my horse freaks out and starts rearing up on its back legs. I had to hold on to him as tight as I could so he wouldn't run off with me and possibly hurt me in the process. After a few minutes of this, the creature walked over in my direction and stood right near our fence line, but I don't think that it saw me. I think it just heard my horse. It sniffed around for another 5 or 10 minutes before it started walking away, still on 2 legs most of the time, but every once in a while dropping down on all 4s. I didn't know what this thing was, but I knew for sure that I didn't want to be anywhere near it. So after about 20 minutes more of watching it wander all around the property, I quietly closed up the barn and slowly walked back to the house so as not to alert it. I went straight to my mom and dad's room and told them what happened. They listened without saying a word until I was done talking. And then they went on to tell me that there had recently been some weird things going on in the woods around the property lately. They said that they now thought it was important that we should all keep a gun or a rifle on us when taking care of the horses or being out of the house at all at night from then on. It was weird for me to see them being like this, really serious and extra cautious. Ever since then, I always make sure to carry protection with me whenever I'm out at night, no matter what the reason is. Honestly, this thing freaks me out even thinking about it still. It was by far one of the strangest things I've ever seen in my life. No, make that the strangest thing by far. My guess is that it was probably 8 feet tall, if not more, very muscular and had dark brown hair all over its body except for its face, which looked like a man's face without hair on it. That's a vision in my mind that has never wavered. It's totally stuck in my brain even when I try to sleep. Like I said, I don't know what this thing was because I only really saw it in the moonlight, but I'm totally convinced it wasn't human. I mean, I've never seen a man that looked like that, at least not in Idaho, but I've never really been anywhere else, so I'm no expert on that. And it also wasn't a coyote either, in case any of you are thinking that. It was something sort of in between, if I can describe it like that. Like I said earlier, it looked like some sort of an escaped circus animal or something. It's hard to explain, but that's the best way I can think to describe it. I'm older now, but still trying to come to a definitive conclusion even after all these years. I hope you can understand what I'm trying to say and that you don't think bad about me.